Before we get started, want to win a free Bible? We're giving away Bibles in our subscriber drawing. To enter, just like this video, subscribe and drop a comment below. Winners will be randomly selected. Don't miss out. The book of 1 Kings is a tale of power, faith, and the consequences of disobedience. It records the golden age of Israel's united monarchy and the tragic decline into corruption and idolatry. At the heart of this book are men who shaped history, some wise, some wicked, all flawed. And through it all, the hand of God moves, calling his people back to righteousness. From the final moments of King David to the fiery confrontation of the prophet Elijah, 1 Kings is a book of both triumph and tragedy. It tells of Israel's rise to power under Solomon, the kingdom's fracture due to sin, and the relentless efforts of prophets to call God's people back to him. This is the story of kings and prophets, of wisdom and folly, and the relentless pursuit of God's truth in a nation torn by division. As the great King David lay on his deathbed around 970 BC, the kingdom of Israel faced a crisis. Who would succeed him? His eldest surviving son, Adonijah, saw himself as the rightful heir. But David, guided by the prophet Nathan and Bathsheba, had chosen another, Solomon, the son of promise. In an urgent ceremony, the priest Zadok anointed Solomon at the Gin spring, officially making him king. The people of Jerusalem rejoiced, but not everyone was pleased. Adonijah's attempt to seize the throne failed, and his ambition cost him his life. Early in his reign, Solomon went to Gibeon, a sacred place where he offered sacrifices to God. That night, the Lord appeared to him in a dream, saying, "Ask for whatever you want me to give you." Rather than requesting riches or power, Solomon asked for wisdom to rule his people justly. Pleased with his humility, God granted him wisdom beyond any man before him, and riches and honor as well. His wisdom became legendary, demonstrated in the famous case of the two mothers. Two women came before him, claiming to be the mother of the same infant. Solomon's response was shocking. Cut the child in two and give half to each mother. One woman immediately cried out, "No, give her the baby, just don't kill him." And at that moment, Solomon knew this was the true mother. His justice became known across Israel and beyond. Under Solomon's reign, Israel became the most prosperous kingdom of its time. He established a vast trading empire, forged alliances, and built an army of chariots. Yet his greatest achievement was the construction of the Temple of the Lord in Jerusalem, a project his father, David, had longed to complete. For 7 years, laborers and artisans worked tirelessly, using the finest cedar from Lebanon and gold from Ophir. In 960 BC, the temple was completed, and the Ark of the Covenant was placed in the most holy place. As the priests began to worship, a thick cloud filled the temple. The glory of the Lord had descended upon his dwelling place. Solomon's fame spread far beyond Israel. The Queen of Sheba journeyed from the south to test his wisdom. Impressed by his knowledge and wealth, she declared, "The report I heard in my own land was true, but not even half was told." Solomon's wisdom, wealth, and devotion to God ushered in Israel's golden age. But as history has shown, success can be fleeting. The same man who built the temple would later lead Israel down a path of compromise. The seeds of division were already being sown, and soon, the United Kingdom would crumble. The question remains, how could a king so wise fall so far? Solomon, once the wisest king in Israel's history, failed to heed his own wisdom. In his later years, he took many foreign wives, 700 wives, and 300 concubines, who led him away from the Lord. Altars to foreign gods, like Ashtoreth and Chemosh, were erected in the land of Israel. And with them came God's judgment. The prophet Ahijah was sent to a young official named Jeroboam. In a dramatic prophecy, he tore his cloak into 12 pieces, handing 10 to Jeroboam. This, he declared, was a sign. God would tear the kingdom from Solomon's line, leaving only one tribe for David's descendants. The golden era of unity was coming to an end. After Solomon's death, his son Rehoboam ascended the throne. The people, weary from Solomon's heavy taxes and labor demands, pleaded for relief. The elders advised Rehoboam to lighten the burden and win the people's loyalty. But the young king rejected their wisdom. Instead, he listened to his reckless young advisors, who told him to rule with an iron fist. Rehoboam's infamous response? "My father made your yoke heavy, but I will make it even heavier. My father chastised you with whips, but I will chastise you with scorpions." The people revolted. The 10 northern tribes rejected Rehoboam's rule, anointing Jeroboam as their king. Only Judah and Benjamin remained loyal to the house of David. And thus, Israel was divided, never to be fully united again. Jeroboam, now king of the northern kingdom, feared that if his people continued to worship at the temple in Jerusalem, their hearts would turn back to Rehoboam. Seeking to secure his reign, he devised a shocking plan. He created 2 golden calves and placed them in Bethel and Dan, declaring to the people, "These are your gods, O Israel, who brought you up out of Egypt." He appointed his own priests, established festivals to rival those of Jerusalem, and led the people into deep idolatry. But God sent a prophet to warn Jeroboam. As he confronted the king at the altar, the prophet declared judgment, and suddenly, the altar split apart. Yet despite the warning, Jeroboam refused to repent. His dynasty, though newly established, was already doomed to fall. With the division of the kingdom, Israel entered a new and dangerous era, one defined by corruption, war, and spiritual decay. The northern kings led their people deeper into idolatry, while Judah struggled to remain faithful. And soon, 2 of the most infamous names in biblical history would rise to power, Ahab and Jezebel. What would happen next? The story of 1 Kings continues. Meanwhile, in the south, Judah was not free from corruption. Though the temple still stood, idolatry crept into the land. King Rehoboam, Solomon's son, allowed pagan worship to flourish, bringing divine displeasure. However, years later, a righteous king arose, Asa. Determined to restore true worship, Asa tore down the high places, removed the idols, and commanded the people to seek the Lord. His reign brought spiritual revival, but Judah's faithfulness would continue to rise and fall with each new king. In the north, a new and wicked ruler emerged, Ahab, son of Omri. Unlike his predecessors, he did not merely tolerate idolatry, he embraced it fully. But his greatest act of defiance was his marriage to Jezebel, a Phoenician princess and devoted worshiper of Baal. Under her influence, Baal worship was not only allowed but enforced. A grand temple was built in Samaria, and altars to Baal were erected throughout the land. Prophets of God were persecuted, and the people of Israel turned further from the Lord. This marked Israel's darkest days, where idolatry was law, and the name of Yahweh was nearly forgotten. But God was not finished with Israel yet. A prophet was rising, one who would challenge the might of Baal and call the nation back to truth. And so, in the darkest hour of Israel's history, a lone voice rose to confront the king. His name was Elijah, and he was sent by God to challenge Ahab and Jezebel's rule. Standing before the throne of the most powerful man in Israel, he declared a shocking prophecy: "As the Lord, the God of Israel, lives, before whom I stand, there shall be neither dew nor rain these years, except by my word." With that, the heavens were sealed, and a devastating drought began. Israel was on the brink of collapse, but this was only the beginning. The confrontation between Elijah and Ahab would shake the nation to its core. The war between Yahweh and Baal was just beginning. As famine spread, Israel would soon witness one of the greatest spiritual confrontations in history. Fire from heaven, a challenge of gods, and the ultimate test of faith. The story of 1 Kings continues. After years of corruption under Ahab and Jezebel, Israel had reached a breaking point. The people had abandoned Yahweh, turning to Baal, the Canaanite storm god. But one man stood against them, the prophet Elijah. Marching into Ahab's court, he proclaimed a shocking prophecy. As the Lord, the God of Israel, lives, before whom I stand, there shall be neither dew nor rain these years, except by my word. Then Elijah vanished, and just as he had spoken, the heavens were sealed. The land withered. Rivers dried up. Famine spread. Yet, even as the people suffered, Ahab and Jezebel refused to turn from their wickedness. After 3 years of drought, Elijah returned with a bold challenge. He summoned Ahab, the prophets of Baal, and all of Israel to Mount Carmel for the ultimate test. How long will you waver between two opinions? Elijah cried out, "If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, follow him." The challenge was set: 2 altars, 2 sacrifices, no fire. The God who answered with fire would be the true God. From morning until evening, the prophets of Baal called on their God, dancing, shouting, even cutting themselves in desperation. But there was no answer. Then Elijah stepped forward. He rebuilt Yahweh's altar, drenched the sacrifice in water, and prayed, "Lord, let it be known today that you are God in Israel." Suddenly, fire fell from heaven, consuming the sacrifice, the wood, even the stones of the altar. The people fell on their faces, declaring, "The Lord, He is God." Baal had been defeated, but the war for Israel's soul was not over. Though Baal's prophets were slain, the battle was not over. When Queen Jezebel heard of Elijah's victory, she was furious. She sent a chilling message, "By this time tomorrow you will be dead." Fear overtook Elijah. He fled into the wilderness, collapsing under a tree, ready to give up. "Lord, take my life," he prayed. But God was not finished with him yet. An angel appeared, offering him bread and water. "Eat," the angel said, "for the journey is too great for you." Strengthened, Elijah traveled 40 days to Mount Sinai, the very place where Moses once met with God. As Elijah stood on the mountain, he waited for God to speak. First, a mighty wind tore through the rocks. Then an earthquake shook the ground. Then a fire blazed before him. But God was in none of these. Finally, there was a still, small voice. And Elijah knew this was God. "Elijah, why are you here?" the Lord asked. "I alone am left, and they seek my life," he answered. But God reassured him, "You are not alone. 7,000 remain in Israel who have not bowed to Baal." Elijah's mission was not over. The battle against idolatry would continue. And though kings and empires would rise and fall, the word of the Lord would endure forever. The battle between Yahweh and Baal had been won, but Israel's struggle was far from over. The reign of Ahab and Jezebel would bring even greater trials. Yet, through it all, God remained faithful to His people. What can we learn from Elijah's story? That even in our darkest moments, God is near. Not in the wind, not in the fire, but in the whisper. Are we listening? The book of 1 Kings is not just a record of history. It is a mirror reflecting the choices that shape nations and individuals. Through the rise of Solomon, the fall of Israel's unity, and the fearless stand of the prophets, this book teaches us profound truths about faith, leadership, and the consequences of disobedience. From the grandeur of Solomon's temple to the corruption of kings, from divine wisdom to heartbreaking apostasy, one truth remains: God calls His people to walk in obedience. And when they stray, He raises up voices, like Elijah, to call them back. The rise and fall of Israel's kings serve as a warning and a lesson. Solomon was blessed with wisdom and prosperity, Yet his divided heart led to the division of the kingdom. Rehoboam's arrogance and Jeroboam's idolatry laid the foundation for centuries of rebellion, as king after king turned from God, leading the people astray. The pattern is clear. When a nation follows God, it prospers. When it abandons him, it crumbles. In the midst of corruption, God did not leave his people without a voice. He raised up prophets, men like Elijah, who stood against kings, who called a lost nation back to its Creator. Elijah's story reminds us that sometimes God's power is displayed in fire from heaven, and sometimes he speaks in a whisper. But through it all, he remains faithful. Even today, the call remains, choose this day whom you will serve. Will we follow the wisdom of God or the ways of the world? The events of 1 Kings are not just ancient history. They are a guide for today. The lessons of faith, obedience, and the dangers of turning away from God remain as relevant now as they were then. We see kingdoms rise and fall, leaders succeed and fail, and people turn to idols, whether they be statues of gold or the distractions of modern life. But the call of God remains unchanged. Follow me. Trust in the Lord, and he will make your paths straight. Seek him, and you will find him. As we close this journey through 1 Kings, let us take to heart its message. Kings rise and fall, but God's truth remains. The wise walk in obedience. The faithful endure trials. And those who seek the Lord will find him. Which of these lessons spoke to you the most? Let us know in the comments below.
Thank you for joining the time traveler on this journey through history. If you found this story moving, insightful, or worth remembering, please take a moment to support the channel by clicking the like button. It helps more people discover these important stories. And if you'd like to see more documentaries like this, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications. Together, we can keep these stories alive for future generations. Your support means the world. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.